Hello, Stan Irvin here in my studio in Rockport, Texas. I threw these spears last night, being very careful to try and make the interior walls as evenly as possible, and I allowed them to stiffen overnight. And they seem to be just about right this morning. It's still a little bit pliable, but still soft enough to trim. I did put a little hole in the bottom after a few hours of allowing this to dry, so that as it shrunk, the compressed air wouldn't split the shape open. So now I can cover that back up, put it back on the wheel, and do a little bit of trimming. I know in these there's kind of a tendency for them to be a little heavier at the bottom, as you might expect. Another reason though for trimming is to recreate that sense of a spiral around this form. So I'm going to start at the top, and instead of letting those trimmings just fall off the tool, I'm going to try and control them a little more so that they don't stick and back onto the form itself. It's really, more than anything else, just cleaning up the form a little and getting that spiral. I'm not sure that you can see that in the video. Then I want to cut this off as flat as possible on the bottom, and I can immediately tell this is in the bottom is really where more of the weight remains. So I made this little chuck. It's just soft clay. I just made it, and I usually do that so that I can make it really fit the exact form that I'm trimming. So I'm going to turn this upside down. That should support it really well, and it's just sticky enough to hold it in place. I don't need any little wads of clay or anything. And because I cut this off straight, I should be able to put that little level on there and level it in one direction, and then turn the level 90 degrees and level it in the other direction. Go back and double check. And that should make this perfectly centered. We'll see. Looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to continue this curve. I was very careful to try to get the interior shape spherical, and so I can kind of rely on that when I'm taking away clay. If the outside is spherical, then the contour should follow the interior and end up with the walls as even as possible. What I'm making here is, what I'm going to make is a lidded box, kind of a soft box. I'm going to push this into a slightly different shape. I'm going to reorient the wheel throwing marks or the trimming marks. And then cut a lid opening. So that feels somewhat better. And you can tell it's not a perfect sphere. It's got a little bit of a bulge down here, but I think I can, actually I think I'm going to put it back on there, see if I can't take a little bit more of that out. Of course I've lost the bottom shape, but the flatness of the bottom, but I think I can still do this. Okay, all right. So now I should be able to flatten this out. Again, there's air trapped inside, so it should be possible to push that down and then maybe even come back and paddle it. Again, I'm kind of going for a box, so I don't want a perfectly flat side, but I do want it to be kind of softly flattened on all four sides. When that starts sticking, just flip your paddle. This could be any shape. As long as you have that air trap inside it, it's not going to collapse. Of course, it could burst open if it gets to a point where you feel like the pressure is too great inside. Sometimes you'll paddle it and the wall will come right back out. It's because it has a little too much pressure. So I'm going to go back to that same place. I can hear a little air come out. And then that's going to allow it to go in more freely. So it's pretty remarkable what you can do with air trap inside. Now I want to look at this from every angle. I can see it's a little wider on this back side than it is on the front side. So hopefully a little more paddling will sort of make that a bit more symmetrical, but I'm not terribly concerned about that. I guess I mainly want it to look intentional. It looks like it's a little higher on this side than over here, so maybe I can manipulate it a little in that way. Okay, so now I'm ready to consider where that lid will open. And one other possibility, if I just make a wavy cut around here, it's still going to be hard to grasp that lid. You could put a handle on top, that would be perfectly doable. But I think instead, because I want to keep this a kind of contained form and not too many additions, I'm just going to push that in a little with my thumb on the opposite side so that I can get a good grip and not necessarily have to put any clay addition to the top. Doesn't take much. So I think that will probably be fine. And then when I begin the cut, I want to start, I usually start with a pencil because I don't want a real deep scratchy mark. I may have to go back and adjust the cut a little. I think I will, and I want the lid to be considerably less than half this total shape, maybe a third or so. So I'm going to start somewhere along here and make just a very light line, something I can go back and change. And this series of peaks and valleys should make it possible for this lid to stay in place, to go back in place and stay there. I want to cut below this little depression because that's going to be part of the lid. And you can see I'm just kind of finding my way around that form, trying to mimic some of the curvature, but at the same time kind of going with the flow of the form. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but that's okay. Change that just a little bit. That seems a little too angular. If you make that cut too, the cut too flat, there's not enough positive and negative, so it doesn't really interlock. The lid can easily slide on the top of the box. Okay, and then I'm gonna use a needle. I think I can follow that line pretty well. And holding the needle perpendicular to the wall, if the wall leans in, the handle of the needle is gonna go up to keep it at right angles to whatever that wall is. So here it curves in, so I'm gonna raise the needle up. And I think you can do this really all in one cut. You notice I'm allowing my fingers to drag a little on the surface just to help keep my hand steady. So much about this kind of thing has to do with positioning yourself so that you can have freedom of movement. You don't want to be in an awkward place where you know, your arm hits the table or your hand hits the table, or you have to, you can't do it in a